some things started to settle out. They weren't great yet. And Big Chuck.
Thank you.
King of the Franks, set up a school at his palace and invited the best known scholars. Now, you got to remember, there were scholars. A lot of them from Ireland, too, by the way.
John Scotus Siriugina was...
In the monasteries,
Yeah. And they had been preserving all they could from the Viking hordes, were sort of like critics. And he started up a school, and in fact, it's called the Carolingian Renaissance. So that marks the next big step. The 400, 800, let's call that the Dark Ages. Some people think the Dark Ages is the whole Middle Ages, but 400, 800. Then from about 800 to 1000 is this sort of rebirthing process. And then round about the 11th century, in the 1000s, the Spanish are making progress on the Reconquista, and they're moving south through the Iberian Peninsula, and they're coming in more and more contact with the Saracens.
So at the same time, what was happening in the Islamic world? These other philosophers you're talking about, when did they live?
Okay, I could look it up.
But it's roughly the 600 to 800.
No, Avicenna was about 1,000.
Yeah, Avicenna was about the,
1100.
So it's right about this time that the greatest of them all are living. The earlier ones, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, was started by Hunayn ibn Ishaq, who was not a Muslim at all. He was a Nestorian Christian and spoke Syriac. And they had been translating the Greek works from Greek into Syriac. And then the Caliph, Harun al-Rashid, said, hey, translate them in Arabic. So they translated them from Syriac in Arabic. They made their way to Iberia. When the Umayyad Caliphate fell, a lot of stuff went, and then other stuff through normal trade followed after. And in Iberia, Al-Andalus, they called it, these works accumulated in the Great Library at Cordoba. And scholars from all over Europe flocked there once it became safe to do that, once the jihad had ebbed slightly and there was a modus vivendi, convivencia, they call it. And by the way, El Cid was fought for the Muslims against Christians. I don't know if many people knew that.
You mean Charlton Heston?
Yeah, practical politics, dude.
He did both, actually.
Yeah.
We went back and forth a bit.
Absolutely. Same thing happened during the Crusades. The Crusaders allied with Muslim emirs were fighting other Crusaders and other Muslim emirs.
It's kind of like Terrell Owens.
Yeah. But anyhow, they started, Archbishop Raimundo in Toledo, not Ohio. Toledo, Spain. Toledo. Okay. Set up a translation school, and they all came there. Herman of Corinthia and John of Sevilla and all, a whole crowd from every country of Europe. They just went crazy. And they started translating these works from Arabic into Latin. Now remember where they came from. They came from Greek, through Syriac, to Arabic, and now to Latin. How many slips of the pen on that journey? Later, when the Mediterranean was safe once again, they made direct contact with Byzantium. Now, Byzantium didn't do very much original in the meantime. They never had to rediscover Aristotle. They never had to translate him. They had him in Greek, and they always had him, and they didn't do nothing. What was his name?
Was it Gerard of Cremona who did the first?
Yeah, Gerard of Cremona went to Toledo and translated all kinds of stuff. And there was also William of Marbeck who went to Sicily and got a hold of the Byzantine stuff. And they started comparing the original Greek to what they got from the Arabs. They found the Arabs had altered some stuff and had mistranslated some concepts. No big surprise going from one language family to another and then back again. So that period, the 11th, 12th century into the 13th century, was a period of digesting this. Now think of that. The same thing happened to the Europeans as happened to the Arabs. They ran into, like almost without warning, an intellectual edifice of absolutely stunning scope. everything was explained. Everything.
Aristotle had it all.
Aristotle was the man. And in fact, that's what got the philosopher in trouble. He was the man, but he was a Greek pagan dude, and that didn't sit well with the mujtahid and the rest of that crowd. So they periodically had to get lashed or flee for their lives. But he was the man. And it was a stunning accomplishment. If anybody ever takes a vote, who was the most brilliant person in human history? Aristotle wins hands down. Because he didn't have Aristotle to start from. Which, by the way, is what stifled science in China. The Chinese were great for collecting facts. They were the anti-Greeks. The Greeks had lots of theories. They didn't try to back them up with facts. The Chinese had lots of facts, but they never even conceived of the idea that it was necessary to explain them with a theory. So their problem, they didn't have an Aristotle. The Arabs didn't have an Aquinas. We had both, so we lucked out.
There's another element, too, that's fascinating, a kind of a flip from the Greeks to the Middle Ages, and you kind of alluded to this with Plato, kind of disparaging. I think, maybe it was in the Republic, he kind of disparaged the practical application of mathematics. We don't, using mathematics for anything other than his kind of, clouds he was building in the sky. Whereas,
And for good reason, because the mathematics they were doing was basically numerology.
right.
And there have to be only 7 planets because there are only 7 regular solids, that kind of thing.
Actually, there are only 5
Regular
regular
solids to the spaces. in
That's why
between
there were
planets.
5 elements.
Right.
Earth, air, fire, water. There's got to be a 5th one. Ether. It's what the heavens are made of. And, of course, the heavens were divine and influential in human affairs. They were alive. The only reason those things moved is that intelligences moved them. It's sort of like the intelligent design theory of astronomy. These intelligences were moving them around, especially planets like Mars, which sometimes went backwards. Explain that. Can't do it. Got to be ether. Okay. Whereas the Westerners started with the idea that the heavens were just another created thing. Because in their religion, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So they're just 2 parts of creation. So then there was a period in the 13th century, culminated in the Great Condemnation of 1277. That could have been the West's incoherence of philosophy moment. Except by that time...
We should explain what this was. The Bishop of Paris,
Etienne
Tempier,
Yeah.
there was a great fight going on at the University of Paris between the philosophers and the theologians, and the philosophers were saying things like, theology is a waste of time, there's nothing there to study, and anybody who contradicts Aristotle is clearly wrong. So, for instance, Aristotle describes how the universe must have a central bottom place where the earth is. There can only be one bottom place, there can only be one universe. And the theologians say, but God could do anything. Tempier, the bishop...
You mean God could make more than one world?
Exactly.
Son of a gun. Could God create a vacuum?
God can do anything.
But Aristotle said there can't be a vacuum.
Uh-oh, we're in trouble.
Did you guys rehearse this?
No, we're just winging it.
So the bishop issued 312, something like that, statements which could not be taught at the University of Paris. But they're all statements like the ones we've just said, that God couldn't do this, that Aristotle is always right. And Pierre Duhem, who wrote a very influential history of science about 100 years ago, argued, probably over-argued, but made the argument that this was the birth of science because it freed people from not only the imprisonment of a theological system that says God did it and therefore we're not going to look any further, but it also freed them from saying Aristotle said so and we can't possibly contradict Aristotle. It gave people the freedom to look beyond Aristotle.